Canadians deserve a parliament that works. They want a government, they want this government to keep governing, to address the issues that matter to them, to keep the country moving forward. So Mr. Dion must decide to fish or cut bait. Either let the current parliament work, let us get on with our mandate, or the voters themselves will decide.
I think what Canadians expect is Parliament to get on with governing the country. I don't think they believe that the purpose of Parliament is to hold a bunch of kangaroo courts or to do investigations into scandals that never occurred or try and pretend that they can second-guess the police in a criminal investigation. These are all ridiculous political games that have nothing to do with the concerns of Canadians. We had a throne speech. We have a mandate from the people. We have a mandate from Parliament. We will be bringing forward important pieces of legislation, but we will not allow this Parliament to be sabotaged because that is not in the long-run interest of this country.
This is political conveniency for the Prime Minister. He's worried about what Canadians may learn about the tricks of his party at the last election. He's worried about the state of the economy, and he's ready to break the spirit of his law in order to call an election.
What does this make of the fixed election law if the Prime Minister can decide at any point declare that Parliament isn't working and go into an election? I mean, is this law a joke?
It said very little about this law, but a lot about the Prime Minister. You have a man who is not respecting the Parliament, and he will not respect his own law. It's always the case. When he sees a political advantage to break his word, he will do it.
Mr. Harper said today that it's now clear that this government will not survive until October 2009 date. Do you agree with that?
Well, I don't agree with the fact that the Prime Minister may break his own law. But it's a fact that I'm considering different possibilities, and one of them is certainly to stop to have strategic voting when we disagree with this government, and then to trigger an election is something that we may do.
Why don't you quit beating around the bush and just say, bring it on, let's have an election, instead of wandering around and saying, maybe I will, maybe I won't. Why don't you make up your mind?
Well, it's your right. I'm listening Canadians, and many Canadians are telling me now, more than before, we are ready for an election. And I take that into account. We did not trigger an election end of June because we thought to have an election during the month of July was not optimal, to be sure that Canadians will focus on these elections as we think we need to, because it will be very crucial. You understand, my job is not the one of Mr. Layton or Mr. Duceppe. My job is not only to protest. My job is to replace. And timing is important in politics, like for fishing, it's the same.
If you're elected Prime Minister, the Conservative fixed election date law will still be on the books. Will you keep that? Will you keep fixed election dates if you're Prime Minister?
Well, we'll look at that very seriously. I think it's very likely that we will keep it and we will respect it.
And if your position is going to be continuing to hint at an election at any time, do you have a timeline or a deadline at which you're going to clear up this issue of whether you want to bring down the government?
Well, I think it's my duty to be in a situation to replace this government. So timing is a legitimate consideration. And the Prime Minister wants to run everyone, but he will not run the official opposition.
Mr. Harper says that he wants to talk with all the parties. Has he contacted you, or has his office contacted your office to set up a meeting to discuss?
Yes, we are in discussion to find a good time for him and me to meet together.
But it will be before the House comes back?
Yes, I think it's normal that we talk. I think it's my duty as leader of the opposition to meet the Prime Minister each time he wants to meet me, or to accept his phone call when he wants to speak to me. I need to continue to carry my own responsibilities, and one of them is to meet the Prime Minister when he is asking me to meet him.
Mr. Dion has indicated that the government should be defeated, but he's not sure when he'll do that because he hasn't got good enough polls. I don't think that's a particularly responsible position. Whether, in fact, the government needs a new mandate, that's a decision, obviously, it's an analysis I'll have to reflect on. I'll have to talk to some of the other parties. But what is absolutely clear from the comments of all three opposition leaders, including Mr. Dion, is they have no intention of respecting the fixed election dates.
But there's been no talking, no meeting. Stephen Dion couldn't fit it into his schedule this week, and he wouldn't do it over the phone.
And now he's saying, I want to meet the leaders of the opposition. I want them to accept my agenda. What is his agenda? Nobody has any idea of what is his agenda, maybe not himself, and he wants me to agree with it on the phone? This is a joke.
Mr. Harper, I'm wondering if you can get specific about where this dysfunction lies. My understanding is there were 43 confidence votes in the last parliamentary session. You're still here as Prime Minister. You survived every one. So where exactly does the dysfunction lie?
Mr. Dion and the opposition have laid down a fundamentally different approach than that of the government. And, that's just a simple reality. The opposition parties have been threatening and or demanding an election for some time. So I think if that is eventually where we have to go, I don't think they will at this point be able to say they're the least bit surprised. I don't know what they want. I think what's clear is that they want to bring down the government and not say when. I think, I think it's also clear that whatever we kind of indicate, we're going to do, they're going to say we should do the opposite. And that's the stage we're at in this Parliament, and that's the problem. Everything the government wants to do, the opposition parties will oppose automatically because they're all at a stage for their own political reasons where they want to oppose the government. Each one of them wants to be seen as opposing the government. And that's, I can decry that, but after 2.5 years of minority government, that's probably an inevitable result. So that's the reality of the situation. I think the problem we're at is that it could be the case that the Liberal Party could change its mind yet again. I mean, Mr. Ignatieff said bring on an election about a week ago. They could change their mind yet again. But as we look at the fall agenda, it looks more and more likely that they may well change their mind on an election, they're not likely to change their mind on any of the government's actual program, that they're likely to continue to oppose all of our programs. I think what has changed qualitatively, as I have reflected on things over the past few weeks, is that Mr. Dion, by laying down his program, his alternative, has now in fact made it impossible for himself and his party to work with the government or to find any common ground with the government. And so I think that's the difficulty. And I think we owe it to, it's not a matter of polls. As you know, the polls aren't particularly wonderful. It's a matter of my responsibility as Prime Minister to make a decision on whether I think the fall session of Parliament can be productive. And as I say, certainly spending weeks and weeks playing telephone tag with guys doesn't help me confirm that things are going to be very productive.
Your analysis of the shifting waters of electoral circumstance over the last few weeks has been quite interesting, but you passed a law on this. I read the law. It's called C-16, Canada Elections Act, Amendment, Fixed Election Dates. It doesn't say fixed election dates unless Stephen Dion is mean to me. What did that law mean when you campaigned on it and passed it?
Well, as we said, when we passed the law, the purpose of a fixed election date is to create certainty. Obviously, in a minority parliament, you can't be certain. I've been clear on that all along. Fact of the matter now, Paul, is that all the opposition parties are clear. They will not support this government going to October in 2009. In the lack of certainty about an election date, it falls back to the government to create that certainty.
Prime Minister, if you do ask the Governor-General to dissolve Parliament, will you consider that you have broken your word to the Canadian people?
No, as I say, I think you can only have, we're clear, you can only have certainty about a fixed election date in the context of a majority government. Look, if any of the opposition parties wanted to provide any degree of certainty that we'll be here to October 2009, then we'll have an election in October 2009. I think all the signs are clear that they're all committed to precisely the opposite. They're committed to an election well before then. If they're clearly committed to that course of action, I think they are, then it behooves the government to provide some responsibility.